How many people wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, the first thing they say is something horrible to themselves? Oh, look at that cellulite, look at that wrinkle, look at that acne. Stuff that if somebody else dared to say that to us, we'd be like, who raised you?
Karith, I'm just so happy to see you. I feel like over the past few months, you've quickly become one of my favorite humans on the planet. So
Aww.
Thank you so much for coming to POVz.
What a treat. Thank you for having me, Sophie.
We have so much to talk about, but I really want to start by asking you this question. We just had a conversation with some amazing young people all about the concept of labels and identity. Do you feel like we've been reduced to our labels?
Yes and no. There are people who are grasping to identify as something so badly so that they have a foundational point from which to think, but it's not always serving them. And no, and that I think there are a lot of people who are out to defy a label. But the irony is within that defiance comes different labels, right? So it's like this wild vortex of labels that we'll probably never get out of. It's because, it's human nature to want to identify someone else, ourselves. What I do in my work and my ask is that we don't just assign one label to ourselves, right? We are multifaceted. We are not monoliths. There's so many things to us. Yes, I'm Black. Yes, I'm a woman. Yes, I'm a mother. Yes, I'm a comedian. I'm a speaker. All of those wonderful things, and to just be siphoned down to one thing that I have to say is me, I think that's really unfair. And I think that robs me of my agency, and I think it robs other people of their agency. It's easy to want to grab one thing and say, this is me. But again, that negates the fact that we're hopefully always evolving. Right?
Absolutely.
You're not always going to be that one thing. So what happens when you're not that thing anymore? What do you have? Where do you go? Who are you? Talk about existential crisis.
Absolutely. I mean, you bring up such an interesting point. I almost see it as the difference between labeling yourself as something or boxing yourself in. And I totally resonate with what you're talking about. I mean, have you ever felt boxed in?
100%.
Has it been labels that other people have put onto you or labels that you self-identified with?
Both. I've done both. When I was younger in high school, probably one of the first times I had to deal with identity, and my identity was when I was told that I wasn't Black enough by my Black peers. And that was a through line for me for some time. I grew up in a very white, not diverse area, Plano, Texas. I jokingly say it has the ethnic diversity of a Klan rally. Some people think that's funny. Some people are like, I'm offended. Take it how you will. It is not like that, but that's the joke, the punchline. So I grew up in a place where I was the only one. I was the only one in any of my classes for a very long time. That was my normal. And I thought, as every teenager does, I want to fit in. I want to feel like I really belong. So I actually transferred schools. I went to the school that was on the east side where there were more Black students. And I thought, this is where I'll feel at home. This is where I will feel a connection to other people. Not realizing that every teenager and adolescent goes through angst and anxiety and doesn't feel like they belong. And I transferred to that school. It was the exact opposite of what I was expecting. I was bullied. My feelings were hurt. I was harassed by the people I went to be part of. That was the irony of it. And then, of course, that took its toll on me mentally, physically. It caused some severe depression. But it did send me on this path. It started me on this path of how I see myself, who I'm going to let define me. And again, that became a through line, even through my career, right? Going into stand-up comedy, where, you get to, people want to pigeonhole you. They want to label you. They want to, oh, well, you're this type of comic, right? This is the type of humor you have. They want to cast you for certain roles on television and in movies. And when you don't fit the type, they don't know what to do with you, because I wasn't the, big Black sassy woman from the streets talking about baby daddies and getting high and the things that were very stereotypical of what was in entertainment. Not necessarily real life, but what the entertainment world, the vision they had of Black women, especially in comedy. And now that's evolving and changing. But I was, the only person I can think of initially who didn't have to ascribed to that was Aisha Tyler. And then there was myself. There were other comics in New York, Leanne Lord. And, now we're in a much different place, but very challenging to be told, no, this is who you are. When you're like, no, I'm not just that. That's part of who I am, but I'm so much more.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you for sharing that. At the time, it must have been hard to have these feelings of wanting to define yourself when I feel like as an adolescent, there's so much pressure to conform. Do you feel like there was one specific moment when you realized that you could be so much more than what someone put onto you? And do you feel like at times you were trapped inside of some form of an echo chamber?
So I've not shared this publicly, maybe once or twice. I talk about it in my book. You can be perfect, you can be happy, but I don't talk about it. Talk about my lovely book you have over there on your bookshelf. That period of time in my life was really hard. I was also suffering from severe asthma. I was on a lot of prednisone. I don't know if you know what prednisone is, but it's a hormone that actually really affects you. I mean, not just like your weight and your appetite, but like emotionally it takes a toll, like as a lot of prescription medication does. And I remember going to my parents and saying, I don't know if I can do this anymore, as in be here. And so I went into an adolescent psychiatric facility where I got a break. And what was fascinating for me was while I was there were other teenagers as well, boys and girls. And it was a time of reflection for me for multiple reasons, right? The quiet was helpful. The outside elements that were really affecting me were not there. But they would have meetings and AA meetings for alcoholics. They would have CD meetings for chemical dependence. They would have SA meetings for people who had been sexually abused. I was the only one who didn't have to go to any of those meetings. And in that moment, I realized how blessed I was, how fortunate I was. Not that my problems weren't significant to me, right? Because your reality is your reality and it affects you how it affects you. But I realized in that moment, like all of the things that I was letting hurt me, all the outside influences, all the other people's opinions and words, that was only penetrating me because I allowed it to. So again, I had this kind of come to Jesus moment with myself, right? Of who are these people that I'm going to let have this power over me? They don't deserve this. They're not worthy of this. I'm way better than this. I think I needed something like that to happen to, again, put me on this path. Now, it didn't end there. Like I said, it was a continuum throughout the early parts of my career. People want to see you a certain way. And there are echo chambers that, of course, it's easy to fall into. Belonging is such a significant human need. I think it takes a really strong person to say, no, I don't have to be surrounded by people who think exactly the same way I do, who see things exactly the same way I do. And that takes maturity, it takes strength, but it also takes an inner knowing. And I think we need to allow ourselves that time to be in that place. And it doesn't happen overnight, and nobody should beat themselves up for not being there instantly.
Absolutely. And it happens at different points in different people's journeys. And I think what's beautiful about what you shared is the agency that you felt over your own experience when you had that aha moment.
Yeah.
And something we talked about on our episode was this notion of whether at the end of the day we actually choose who we are, or do other people define that based on what they put onto us? Do you feel like as human beings, we all ultimately have that agency? Or do you feel like because some people put us into boxes or put identities onto us, that we actually don't have a say in who we are?
We know when we're not being true to that because it hurts. Because it hurts. Your soul, your body speaks to you. Your mind speaks to you. Your gut speaks to you. Your heart speaks to you when you are not being authentic to yourself. And I think that's what depression is. I think that's what anxiety is. The goal then is how do you get there? And again, it's not an overnight process. I don't want anyone to think like you're doing something wrong, you're living wrong. There's no such thing as perfect. That's why I wrote the book, right? There's no such thing as perfect. You can strive for excellence, of course, but understand that nobody else is perfect either. And there's a great quote out there. It's why would you listen to criticism from someone you wouldn't probably even take advice from? And how often do we do that? How often do we let someone else's words or thoughts, who we don't even care for, penetrate our hearts and our minds.
I think you said that to me last time you were here, and I remember feeling a sigh of relief. I mean, the entire essence of your book, I feel like, is something that I so needed, and I know you're giving that to so many other people. How did you get from where you were in this period of your life where you were carving out your own identity to where you are now helping other people navigate through this? How did you get from point A to point B with Inversity Solutions?
It was a journey for sure, but so much of Inversity, and if I, may share, Inversity is my reframing of the word diversity, but also the whole diversity, equity, inclusion movement, DEI or DEIB, as they say, because I felt like there's so much division that comes from it. And hello, look at the word diversity. The root of it is DIV, divide, divorce, divergent, right? Away from. And we're shocked that all this diversity work isn't bringing us closer together. It's literally right in front of our faces. I coined the term inversity. And inversity doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge that there are things like racism and sexism, anti-Semitism and homophobia. Like, those things exist. They do. And it's not a glossing over of that. But what it is more of is a celebration of all the things that make us unique and wonderful and our identities. It's honoring those things. But it's shifting the focus from what separates and divides us to what is it that we have in common? How can we be truly inclusive of one another? But most importantly and powerfully, how can we be introspective, right? Meaning understanding your value, your worth, your connection to humanity. Because when you can see those things in yourself, that's when you can then see them in someone else. We've been working from the outside in this whole time. We've been doing this wrong. It has to start here. How many people wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, the first thing they say is something horrible to themselves?
I know, I do.
I mean, look at that cellulite, look at that wrinkle, look at that acne, look at that hair. Stuff that if somebody else dared to say that to us, we'd be like, who raised you? We'd be completely insulted, and yet we do it to ourselves on a regular basis. That's what inversity is about. It's about understanding your value. And the fact that your mere existence means you have purpose. You wouldn't be here if that weren't the case. There are no mistakes. The universe doesn't make mistakes. Source doesn't make mistakes. We're connected to something greater than us and to each other. And we forget that there's a disconnection that's happening on a monumental level that has people feeling so isolated that they do have to grapple to an identity to feel like they belong to something. We belong to each other. We belong to ourselves, and to be able to honor that and see that. And that is where the book kind of ties into things, because the book is teaching people that perfection is not a reality. Happiness is a choice. It's as individual as we are, but it's a choice. And now the caveat is it's not a constant. And to think that we're supposed to be happy and on all the time and everything's great, that's bullshit. That's not how life works. When you're up here, you enjoy the heck out of it. You revel in it, you treasure it. And when you get down here, you know that it's temporary. But how in the world would you be able to appreciate when it's good if it doesn't go bad sometimes? Like, that's life. The only time, just like a heart monitor, we are ever in trouble is when we have that straight line.
It's a powerful analogy. I mean, I think this is why I feel so connected to you, Karith, because so much of the work you're doing with Inversity correlates exactly to the reason why I get out of bed every day. It's trying to help people come back to this notion that we have so much more in common than the things that we perceive to divide us day in and day out. And as someone who does this work every single day, how do you navigate when we can't even get people to the table to hear this idea? I think I read on your website something around the idea that you may leave a session or a keynote or a workshop around DEI not being able to hold hands and sing Kumbaya. And the goal at the end of the day is not to get everyone to agree. But what I'm observing in our work of trying to bring people together through conversation is that we can't even get people to that campfire. Of course, not singing Kumbaya, but we can't even get people back to see one another. Where do you think that comes from, and how do we start getting people to come a little bit closer together?
I think it comes from DEI work done wrong and done poorly. The misnomer is that diversity it's a two-way street, right? And it's not. It's really a 6-lane highway. But the two-way street that we've been told, is that diversity is merely about our ethnicity, i.e. race. I don't like to say that because there's no other race of people. It's the human race. That it is about gender or that it's about sexuality. True diversity is about so much more than those things. Yet those are the main focuses. It's about neurodiversity. It's about diversity of thought. It's about socioeconomic status, ideas. It's true diversity is about so much more, and it's inclusive, truly inclusive of everyone, not just marginalized groups of people. The other misnomer about in that two-way street of diversity is that it's only successful if at the end of it, everybody sees everything the same way and we all agree. That is the antithesis of true diversity, right? So why can't we see things differently, have different opinions, have different belief systems, but still find the other person worthy? Because they're a fellow human being. My goal is to bring people in, right? There's a lot of calling out right now. And I get it. You feel good when you can put somebody in their place. There's a self-righteousness, right? And you're virtuous. That's pretty popular right now. But when you call someone in versus calling someone out, that changes everything. That changes everything, and we don't need to be at each other's throats.
So much of what you're sharing, it just reminds me of something we're really struggling with right now at TC. I agree with so much of what you're saying around the notion that discomfort is good. And that's why we want to put people in these uncomfortable conversations, because that's where we create tension, and through that friction, we can create change. But I find that nowadays there are a lot of moments where we equate discomfort and hate. And I'm really having a hard time carving out and distinguishing between the two. And more specifically, if I can just be vulnerable, we work with amazing trans people on our platform. I have so many amazing transgender friends. And oftentimes when we bring them into a conversation, their identity is brought into question. And there are conversations that are had surrounding the transgender experience. And we also work with and speak to people who are maybe on the right politically, or maybe feel ignorant or don't understand the trans experience. And we oftentimes get into these muddy waters around what is the difference between an uncomfortable conversation versus when your identity is being called into question. And how do we have these conversations in a safe, intentional way where we can clear up that ignorance or create understanding without making certain people feel that their rights are on the table?
Well, I think one of the things we need to do is we need to trade the word safe for brave, right? Because safe means, in this context, right, the safe spaces, means you're protected from ideas, you're protected from things that are, in your perception, going to hurt you. If you're sincere about this work, you have to be brave. You have to be brave enough to stand up for what you believe in and for who you are. You have to be brave enough to hear ideas and thoughts and words from someone who doesn't get it yet, who may not see it your way, who has their own perception, right? And this is very personal work, because for every single one of us, because it's about who we are and how we're showing up, how we're being seen, how we see ourselves, right? And feelings, right? You can't really quantify that. And we're trying to make it quantifiable. In my work, I beg people to stay curious about one another. We've been told, well, you can't ask that question, you can't say that. You can be curious and you can be courteous. The reason I stress being curious and continuing that is because the opposite of love isn't hate. The opposite of love is indifference. And when we stop being curious about one another, we are indifferent. And that's when you don't see someone as a human. That's when you don't see someone as valuable. That's when you don't see someone who matters, when you're indifferent to them. Even if there's hate, there's a passion there. There's some kind of connection to it. Now, I don't approve of hate. I'm not saying go out and hate on people, but when you're indifferent, that's when you don't care what happens if they live or die. You don't care anything about that person. And that's going to be the downfall of society. So what I ask of the people who are on the receiving end of the curiosity, be patient, have grace. And for the people who are curious, put yourself in that other person's shoes. How would you like to be spoken to? How would you like to be treated? So much of this is about conscious empathy, right? And in my work, I say I want people to care. And CARE is an acronym for conscious empathy, active listening, responsible reactions, and environmental awareness. And the responsible reactions is where we make or break a conversation. And sometimes it means taking a breath. Sometimes it means having a moment, stepping away. But it always includes follow up. It always includes, well, why did you say that? Where did that come from? There are a multitude of reasons why people say wackadoodle stuff. They're just curious. Sometimes they are callous. But my belief about that is hurt people hurt people. And I don't charge anyone with being a psychologist or a therapist or, and certainly don't put yourself in any kind of danger. But what I do ask is, if you can come from a place of love and authenticity, that is courage and that is contagious. And when you can do that, you throw those people that are in that negative space off guard because they're expecting to be met with the same vitriol that they're delivering. And that's hard. It takes a big person to do that. And you may not always have the energy to do that. So I'm not asking you to, wear yourself thin and exhaust yourself. That's self-care is very important. But if you're serious about making a dent and getting other people to see another perspective in another way, I too have several trans friends. One of whom is a mentor to people who are going through transition to help them decide if that's what they really want to do, or are they just searching for something, helping their families kind of cope and deal. Because for a lot of people, it's like a mini death in a way, for the people who knew them. Now you're somebody else. You're like, wait, what happened? Like, there's so many feelings of guilt, of sorrow, of, did I do something wrong? Did I not support you earlier? Like, it runs the gamut. It's not easy for anyone. And my heart goes out to anybody who is in a position of feeling like they were born in the wrong body. And I can't imagine what that might feel like. And so for me, I have to up my game of conscious empathy because that's not an experience I've ever had. But we have to be very careful how we treat other people, especially the people that may not be completely confident in where they are. When I say that, it's often the group that people are trying to associate with that can be the hardest. When I say that, when I do comedy, right, the toughest audiences I have are the audiences that I think should fully embrace me, right? Sometimes the Black audiences or the urban-ish, as they say. But you're my people. What's going on? The people that should love you the most and embrace you the most sometimes give you the most challenge.
Which I think may go back to the feeling that we all have deep down to conform. There's this pressure that we feel to be accepted by our tribe or our people that represent us. And I know I resonate with that in a lot of ways, being Jewish. And I had a very similar realization to you that you experienced growing up, where you wanted to find belonging by surrounding yourself with people who looked like you and had similar backgrounds, when in reality, that was the ultimate antithesis of what belonging is about. It's becoming secure in who you are and being able to exist, as Brene Brown says, in the wilderness, whether you're by yourself or surrounded by others, but you're confident in who you are. We could talk for hours and hours and hours, but obviously we're a Gen Z platform and we have some amazing perspectives from our community. So I just want to read a few to get your take. Let's do it. This perspective comes from Mikey Sharino. It says, hot take. I wouldn't consider diversity to be a strength. However, it not being a strength doesn't equate to being an inherently bad thing either.
Oh, Mikey. Oh, Mikey. Well, I was just at a debate at MIT. The topic in question was, do we take DEI or diversity out of higher education? There were academics there saying, absolutely, we need to replace it with MFE, merit, fairness, and equity. And my take was, you can't get rid of diversity in its entirety. Like, that's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The problem is that the way diversity has been done for so long, it's like bringing a cute baby to the pool party, right, that everybody's invited to, and not putting a swim diaper on them. And they've ruined it for everybody. So what we need to do is we really need to reform and revise how we're going about this so that it is a conversation of true inclusion, which is threatening sometimes to people who are like, well, I don't want to hear anything else. or you're trying to indoctrinate me into something. No, you still have agency over yourself. But the idea is very much like free speech, right? Like if we take that away, even the hate speech, which nobody likes, then when does it not happen to you? When do you not have your voice taken away? It's tricky.
I hear what you're saying, though. I mean, this is something that I struggle with in the work that we do, because at the end of the day, in order to build what I am thinking of as a unified world, we have to have a baseline that we're kind of defining as our Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yes.
Where at the very foundation of our work, we have to be able to respect one another, see each other for who we are. But at the same time, we need to kind of accept that diversity is a good thing. Right? We all have a right to exist as we are. That includes you, that includes me. But I really struggle when there are people that don't think diversity is a strength. What do you say to someone who doesn't think diversity is our greatest strength?
I think they're entitled to that opinion. They really genuinely are. And I have to have that stance. Otherwise, I'm I'm negating everything I just said. And it's challenging. And it's okay for people to hold those different thoughts and beliefs. It really is. But if I'm going to hold on to that is not okay, what does that do for me? Nothing but torture me.
Got it.
You know, at some point, and that is what I've learned getting older. The art of letting go. When I was younger, my mom, I'd come home from school, sometimes middle school, I'd be upset I didn't sit with somebody. She's like, Karith, are you going to get upset at the ones and the twos? Is that what's going to rob you? Is that what's going to take your energy? Because what's going to happen when the 9s and the 10s come along? You're going to have nothing left. And I hated when she said that. I just rolled my eyes and be like, oh, Mom, now I get it. I get it. And I have to look at things in life. Is this a 1 and a 2? Is that statement somebody made? Is that comment? Is that post? Was that interview a 1 and a 2? Or was it a 9 and a 10? Because guess what? If we are spending all of our times on the 1s and the 2s, we are going to be exhausted. And I think that's why people are exhausted. Because they're getting upset over so many little things that in the scheme of things doesn't really make a difference.
I love that advice from your mom. I mean, I've never thought of it that way. And I'm sitting here, obviously our whole platform is about opening our conceptions of thinking and opening our echo chambers. And I think today you really helped me understand that so much of what I've been trying to do is trying to get someone like Mikey to agree that diversity is our greatest strength. Because if we can't all agree on that, how are we going to move forward? But I think you gave me this new understanding today that that isn't what it's about, right? We can all have different conceptions of the way we even build that foundation. And it's okay if we don't agree. And I'm so grateful that you said that, because I think I've been holding on to that so tightly.
Yeah.
What do you think it is going to take to start building a more unified, a more connected, and a more celebration of humanity in our world today?
I think it's just going to take a lot of letting go, right? Of preconceived notions of how things should be, how we should be, how the world should be, and a lot more love. I that may sound cheesy to some people, but when you love, you know, the Greeks, they really nailed it. They have over 14 words for love. We have 1, right? There's different types of love you can have. So much of this is self-worth. So much of this, I said self-worth, but it's true. Self-work. Right? And loving ourselves and being kind to ourselves. We are not kind to ourselves. We'll hold the door for somebody else, and then, like I said, we'll talk smack to ourselves in the mirror. That has to change. It has to change.
And where do you start? How do you start that?
You start
process?
Every time you say something negative to yourself, you have to catch it, and minimum say 5 positive things back to yourself. Because it's like cognitive behavioral therapy, right? You have to retrain your brain. And even if you don't believe it on the onset, your brain, parts of your brain do believe it. So you start acting it and you start living it. And it may seem like, oh, that's not even true. Well, I don't care. Do it anyway. Every time you say something negative, oh, I look fat today. My outfit doesn't match. Say, you know what? I'm really creative. I'm really creative. I'm really creative. 5 times minimum. Something positive. Because we all have something positive about ourselves. Again, we would not be here if we did not have purpose.
Just want to let that sit for a second. Karith, thank you. Thank you for offering so many new perspectives today that I've never considered. I can't wait to have people listen to this. I think they're going to feel the way I'm feeling. And I'm so grateful to have role models and mentors and friends like you who are who know this work in and out that I can look to as I get out of bed every day. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, Mel.
Hopefully this is our first conversation of 1,000.
Oh my goodness, you know it is. It is.
Thank you so much, Karith. Come here.
Oh, you're amazing. Love you.